Evening, everybody. This is Dr. Hack, and we're going to circle back to our pawn endgames today, and we're going to push that theory just a little bit further forward. Great. Now, I do realize that in a complete endgame course, you eventually have to put pieces on the board. Don't worry, we're getting there. Maybe next time, right? We're getting close. And for now, though, we just need to figure out what happens if our pawns race and one of them gets to the end faster than the other one. Right? Hopefully we're the guy with the queen. We're going to pretend like we are today. And the way we're going to plant this stepping stone in your brains is we're going to pretend like this guy is a horsefly on a Fruit Loop. And he's never going to leave that pawn. And that means that with one defender, you're going to need two attackers to go get that guy. And last I counted, you only got two attackers on the board. So your queen and your king are going to have to walk down next to this guy in order to win the game. Okay. What happens when we move the king? Well, that didn't work out because now he's got a queen on the board and not a pawn. Draw. Okay. Or worse, we accidentally blunder our queen and lose. That would be terrible. Okay, so we can't let him queen the pawn. Well, let's logic this. How do we stop a pawn from making a queen? Well, I can think of a couple of ways, right? One of the ways is if his king is in check, the pawn doesn't have time to make a queen. Well, that's a good one, right? If we were to pin the pawn, right? If we were to pin it to the king like this move, it couldn't move forward and make a queen. That works temporarily. What would happen if we imagined for a minute that this king was like maybe up there and we had a piece sitting right here? If we have a piece sitting in front of his pawn and his king's marching around behind it defending it, there's no way he's ever going to make a queen there either. So having one of our own pieces in front of the pawn is actually one of the more foolproof ways. If you can do that, you got it. Nailed it. Unfortunately, with a king here, we're never going to get to put a piece there without both of them being close enough. Back to the same problem again. Okay, what though would happen if his king was sitting in front of the pawn? Well, we know that's not going to happen for very long because his king has to move every turn. And so if he manages to put his king here, we have one turn only to move our king closer. And when we do that, his king's going to move out again. And we're going to have to do something else to force his king to go back in front of it again. But that's exactly the way we're going to have to do it in this case, because we can't put one of our own pieces in front of the pawn. So let's try that. Well, let's give a check. And let's say the king is smart, and he doesn't want to move there. So he moves this way. Oh no, he's about to make a queen. What do we do? Well, let's give another check. Okay, now he has to move back in to defend the pawn because we're attacking it. Let's go. And then we give a check. And he moves out again. And we go, this could go on all day. Check, check, check. Oh boy. Pause the video here for a minute if you can, if you want to. This is white to move and find a way to force the king in front of that pawn. If you found this move, congratulations, you nailed it. Okay, so the king has now to move to defend the pawn again. He only has one place to go. And now when we check him, if he moves this way, we take the pawn, so he must move in front of the pawn. And that gives us just enough time to move our king one step closer. And then he moves out again. And then we rinse and repeat. Okay, more checks. Here we go. How do we find a check? There's one. There's one. Okay, here's one. Gosh. Oh, here we are again in our position on the other side of the board. Magic move. We're stopping the pawn from making a queen, and we're also attacking it. So he has to come in and guard it. And then we give a check, and he steps in front, and our king can get closer. Rinse and repeat. Okay, he's out again. This time it gets a little bit easier because our king is close-ish, and the queen can sit being defended by our king and just force him straight away back. And then when we move in with our king, now we're both touching the pawn, and we can capture it, and hopefully we know how to checkmate from here because it's only one move away. Okay. So we go back to the beginning and we say, okay, so with a pawn on the second row or seventh row in the center of the board, we know these two. We can win. Well, let's be good endgame students now and let's move the pawn over one. It should be look something like this, right? Now I'll admit, I've cheesed this a little bit because I could have put the queen way back here, right, and made us play for it and work on it. But I put the queen right where we're going to give the check and force the king to go in front of the pawn or to the corner. He only has those two moves, right? Which one should he choose? Well, if he moves in front of the pawn, we just bring our king in and we know how to win this. We'll eventually get close enough, we'll eventually win the game. But what would happen if he moved to the corner? It seems foolish, doesn't it? We can just take the pawn. Black has no moves, and he's not in check. It's a stalemate. We just drew the game. Oh, no. So we go back and we go, well, what else could we have done here? Well, we could have put him in check again, I guess. What else could we have done here? Well, we got to stop the pawn from queen. I guess we got to put him in check. And he never has to move in front of his pawn because he always has this resource. Oh, I hate it when they have resources, don't you? So we actually can't win the game if the pawn is on a queen's or on a bishop's file. We could win the game if the pawn was in the middle because it's symmetrical. So if it works on that one, it works on this one. We can't win the game if the pawn is here and his king can reach the corner at this moment, which means that one also doesn't work. Same reason. His king can move to the corner. When we take it, we'll stalemate him. Oh, no. Right? So now we have exceptions to rules. Oh, great. And what about the knight's file? Let's move this pawn over one more. Well, what happens when we step in and make our check this time? Well, he can't just move to the center of the board. We'll take the pawn, and that'll be great. So he's going to move in front of it, and that lets our king move closer. Oh, fantastic. How about now? He moves back in front of the pawn. Great. This is white to move. Don't make any mistakes now. What would you do? Well, the mistake that could be made here is to not realize that his king doesn't have any legal moves at all, and to block all the squares off, and now he can't leave with his king, and he can't move his pawn, and we've stalemated him again. Oh, no. The correct move, I guess, was to move closer on the third row. And I think that gives us kind of an important thing to think about. If we're approaching him on the first row or the second row, we have a chance to stalemate him. But if we're approaching on the third row, or if we're approaching from the top or the diagonal, we're never going to stalemate because the king will always have this square to move to. Huh, that's interesting, right? And that means that when he moves here, if we wanted to win the pawn, there are probably a few ways to do that. One of them is just this. His king has to move back in front of the pawn, and then we can move closer and we win it. Fantastic. But we actually could have checkmated from here. Do you see it? White to move. Checkmate in one. Yeah, there it is, huh? His pawn is blocking his only escape square. Oh no, my king, right? Okay, so the knight's pawn is also a win. So now we've got win, 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 win. Draw, draw. Oh, we better check this last square then. Let's move this over to the rook's file. And what happens when we give this check and he moves under the pawn? Oh no, he's in stalemate. We better move our queen. Let's give him another check. Oh, he's out. Oh no, he's going to make a queen. We better give him another check. Okay. Well, we better give him another check. Oh no, right? We can't move our king closer because he's in stalemate. He can't move his king. He can't move his pawn. Oh no. So every time we want to move our king closer, every time we get him to the square we want him to be at, the game ends in a draw from stalemate when we move our king. That's no good. That means the only way to win a rook pawn ending is to put your queen or your king in front of that pawn, right? If you are a beginner or intermediate player, look away, right? I'm going to show the advanced players how they can win this endgame once in a while, all right, with sheer guile, right, an expectation that they're going to win, and also some exceptions to the rules, but they're complicated exceptions. Okay, here we go. So once in a while, we are close enough with our king to be able to win the game regardless of what happens next. And so we can let white queen the pawn. As a matter of fact, we must let white queen the pawn sometimes. Watch what happens if I work my queen up to the 7th row with checks all the time. Okay, and if he moves here, let's say we give him another check. And if he moves, because he doesn't want to lose his queen, so he won't move there and let us take it. That'd be bad news. And let's give him another check. Okay, and let's put him back here. And let's now move our king one square closer. If you're a high-level player, you've already seen the problem. The white queen cannot move anywhere to check the black king, and he cannot move anywhere to stop checkmate from happening in one of these 4 places. This is going to be game over. And so black has won the game by allowing the pawn to queen in the corner. Now, we need to build a stepping stone to understand that. because it had to do with the king being close enough to touch this square exactly. So if your king was close enough to step into this square, you got it, which meant you could have been here or here. And both of those things, once the pawn went in, they were close enough to do it. Okay? That also means we had a whole bunch of squares on this side that were close enough to touch that square. So if you're anywhere over here, you're close enough to move in to those squares to touch this to make the checkmate. So we have kind of a zone then, a zone for our king. Hopefully you can see why some of the other squares aren't highlighted here. We're not highlighting this one because when the pawn queens it will be with check. We're not highlighting this one for the same reason. Okay? So on black's turn, if he can move his king into any of these squares, then he can win the game. That means that his zone for his turn is much further back, isn't it? That means he can be on any of these. And if it's black's turn to move, his king can step into one of those squares and he's still close enough to win the game. Wow. Okay. And I would say then that if we were to put this in another position like this one with the king to the side, when the queen finally does make it in, this would be the most interesting move to me, by the way. I'm sure you could play the check first and work your queen closer if you wanted to. But when the pawn queens, that gives us the ability to mate in one. Okay. And we could do that several ways. If you wanted to, actually, with this one, you could have forced your way with the queen into the square in front of the pawn as well. That also wins, because now your king can step in and get the pawn. Just takes longer. Cool. We're going to end this video with one problem for you to solve. Okay? And I'm gonna ask that you try to pause the video and work it out. This is white to move, but I'm not telling you which side is winning this. You have to figure it out. And you choose which side you're going to play. And if you're right, if you pick white and white wins, or if you pick black and black wins, you get a full score. And you got to tell me what, if you know, be honest. Tell me in the comments if you actually got it. Okay. I'm going to be quiet for just a second. Think. Pause the video. Okay. So, first things first. If the white pawn were to simply move forward, black would win this way. Because there's no way for white's king to keep the black king out of the corner. So even if the pawn keeps marching, he's going to sit in front of it, and this king is nowhere near close enough. Remember the square of the pawn? He would have to be this close to stop the black pawn from queening. He's just not that close. As soon as he bails and starts to run, we realize he's not close enough to stop it. Okay. So we come back and we see white's first move cannot be the pawn move. It must be the king move to keep black's king out. Only move. Okay? And now the pawns can start to move because they're both going to queen. It's a race. And one of them is going to queen before the other. And it's going to be with check. Now, if you caught that was going to be with check, then you already know what's happening next because of that exception to the rule thing we just looked at. Our king is plenty close enough to that square. He's already touching it. And so now when the white king moves, all we have to do to end this the quickest way is move our king to the c file. Now, again, there are plenty of ways to win this otherwise. So if you found a different way, A-okay. And checkmate, and the game ends. Do hope this video helps somebody. You guys have a good one. Take care now. Bye.